everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of Daddy Chats. And here with me, once again, is the amazing Count Dooku.
Hi. Close enough. You got the first letter right.
Yeah. Well, I thought I'd say it immediately. I partly considered just not addressing the Dooku outfit the whole time.
One could say I've been looking forward to this one.
So, but for those of you who are, for the people at home that are watching and somehow don't know who you are, if you've been on UK TikTok, of course you know who Count Daedalus is. But for those who are probably Americans who, only watch the Kardashians, would you like to explain who you are and what sort of stuff you do?
Well, as you said, I'm a TikTok creator. I specialise mostly in political commentary, some occasional history content. I sometimes do things about dictators, and I also throw a bit of space content in there as well. But most of my stuff focuses around calming people down with hysteria when it comes to nuclear war and World War III.
I noticed earlier on your live earlier, a lot of people were talking about tsunami nukes, which was
Don't even get me started.
I know you can do that with what's it called, the rod of God or the tungsten rod, whatever it's called, because that's meant to be seismic. But I've not heard of.
You could potentially do something like that with rods of God, yes, but nuclear weapons, no. There's been so many underwater nuclear weapons tests, and every last one of them has been much weaker than detonating it in open air, because if anyone who knows anything about physics will know that water absorbs most of the energy.
Yeah.
So you get like a big splash, but no tsunami, no 800-foot tsunami covering the whole of the UK.
Because I know that the more force you put on water as well, basically turns it into a solid. That's why if you land flat on water, it shatters all your bones. But if you dive, it doesn't. To my knowledge.
More or less.
Anyways, yeah, we immediately, before we even got going, we've hit a tangent, and that is what the show is all about. I really sound like a radio presenter there as well, and that's what the show is all about. But, so today's topic really is based on the Count's recent Dictator series, which you can check out on his YouTube channel and on TikTok. More so YouTube, because TikTok is doing its favourite thing to do, and doing that lovely little account warning stuff like that. So to kick off, we're going to start with perhaps your favourite person in history, Pol Pot. I wouldn't necessarily call him my favourite. I think my favourite dictator of all time has to be Idi Amin, just for his title. But that's funny enough how the series started off. Someone asked me who I think the most insane leader was, and that's who I said. And one of the worst ones was arguably Pol Pot. And I always say that it's just a good thing that Pol Pot wasn't in charge of a larger country like China or the Soviet Union with a much bigger population, because his policies were pretty ruthless. I mean, when he took over Cambodia with his Khmer Rouge regime, if you like, that's what it was called. He attempted to create an agrarian socialist society that he believed would evolve into a communist one. And all of his collectivization, forcing people to relocate to the countryside from urban areas and pursuing complete egalitarianism and abolishing all money, he ended up exterminating around, and you should probably take your glasses off for this one, in solidarity with the people who got killed by Pol Pot, was that he ended up wiping out around 3 million out of a population of 8 million. He pretty much declared war on education itself, the concept of education. He killed anyone that was deemed to be intelligent. So even if you just wore glasses or spoke a foreign language, you were executed. He was pretty ruthless. Was it almost a Stalinist sort of paranoia that caused this, or?
I don't even know I wouldn't even say it was Stalinist paranoia, to be honest. It seemed more like ideological, because it was mass killings of government opponents and malnutrition and poor medical care as well, which is why it ended up being not only just known as the Cambodian genocide, but you ended up getting what's called the Cambodian killing fields.
Yes, I've seen those pictures where it's just like fields upon fields of like people in the tall grass.
Yeah, it's a literal mountain of skulls. Essentially, it's pretty horrific.
The human race is particularly, it does have one only. I mean, there was a bit in the Grand Tour, because I will admit my knowledge like of dictators is mainly like Stalin and Tito, and then obviously I'm mostly the ancient world. But there's a bit in the Grand Tour where they go to a particular bar where all the journalists sit, or used to sat, like the international journalists who would come into Cambodia and stuff like that. I believe they're in Cambodia when they're in the bar. And it's just weird because that was like known as the safe zone because it was internationally owned, so they couldn't be carted off in the middle of the night there. Yeah.
He went one step further. You know, it wasn't just enough to kill like millions of people, like a third of the population. He then decided that the Khmer Rouge then decided to target the children of people that they killed. It was a common policy by the Khmer Rouge government to take the children and the babies of victims of the Khmer Rouge regime and bash their heads against trees so that they could not then grow up and take revenge on the Khmer Rouge.
That's like I knew.
It's, like I say, it's one of the most sick, twisted like groups in all of human history, as far as I'm concerned.
That's like, I've just realised I'm probably going to have to put a little bit of a warning in front of this one to say to people like, if you're uncomfortable with more horrific parts of history, maybe don't watch this. Because like one of the worst war crimes that's similar to that I knew of, like I knew that obviously in China with when young girls were born, they were often like just thrown into rivers and stuff. I heard about stuff like that, but the one that's always stuck with me is always what the Japanese did in Nanking, and like especially to the children. And if you've ever seen those photos, I don't recommend it. And I'm one of those persons like, you should Google this. It's funny. But this is like Nanking, like there was moments when they would go up and like rape women and then impale them and then just leave them. But because they were Chinese, it was considered they weren't like proper women and stuff like that. And this was all because they had been shown up by Chinese forces, I believe, at the Battle of Shanghai. I may be wrong, but it was a previous battle before Nanking. Nanking was so horrific. There was a Nazi consul or a Nazi ambassador there who then organised an international zone with like various international people where they held off the Japanese and then like brought civilians into this small international zone. He was then taken out and went back to Germany where he petitioned the Nazis, and obviously they wouldn't listen. But it's like he's always known. I don't want to say it 'cause it's going to get clipped, but from some of the stuff I've read about, I think his name's Jonathan Raab. He gets called like the good Nazi, and I know that's going to get clipped. I'm scared of that. Now I'm just going to see a clip on TikTok now. I know how the
context matters. Context matters.
Context matters, right? And the reason he said that is because he saved so many civilians, and like he did his best. But when he went back to Germany, obviously the Nazis didn't care because they're Nazis. But the people he did show it to were allegedly shocked and appalled. And I always sit there and I'm like, if you're doing something so shocking that you bring a Nazi back to reality, and like, maybe my party isn't that good, maybe you're not that. If you're doing stuff that horrific, and just you saying the baby's bashed against trees just reminds me of Nanking. Like, yeah, it's one of the...
It's all ideology. It's all part of the ideology. Like it's complete commitment to ideology and seeing it through, and not caring about human life. I mean, that's generally the vibe that I get from the various communist dictators, especially with the likes of Mao, Stalin, and Pol Pot as well. Ironically, mentioning China, funny enough, he wasn't. Pol Pot became increasingly unpopular amongst the commies, but
I wonder why.
But China continued to back him because they saw him as a counter to Soviet influence. This was after the Sino-Soviet split.
Yes. which I believe it was it Reagan or Nixon? It was one of those two. I always get those two mixed up. It
was Nixon.
Was it Nixon that turned around to Stalin was like, "You got to stop attacking the Chinese, otherwise we're going to come in and do something." It was one of those.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I thought you meant the president who pursued relations with China.
No, I can't remember. Someone it might have been Nixon, and if he was getting really like cushy with China, I remember watching it. I believe it was a Timeline documentary specifically on how Mao got jealous of Stalin and started like obviously that led to the Great Leap Forward, and another thing that will get people upset in the comments, the big off famine. Obviously that then had the Sino-Soviet like kerfuffle when they went at each other, and I can't remember which president it was, but they phoned up and they were like, "We're gonna back China if you don't back off," pretty much. And I remember sitting there thinking, why would you, if you're in the middle of a forest and a bear and a tiger are hunting you, and then the bear and the tiger notice each other and start fighting each other, you don't go up to the bear and say, "If you don't leave that tiger alone, mate, we're gonna have some trouble." Like I've never understood that logically. You want the bear and the tiger to finish each other off, and then you just go in for the spoils. And like again, I'm not advocating for, as I've made very clear, I'm very anti-war.
Well, obviously not.
But I'm saying, like, from a logical standpoint, in history, you want your enemy to fight off. That's why the Parthians stayed out of all of the Romans' conflicts with the Gauls and the Celts. Mainly the more Germanic. I meant Germanic tribes and the Celtic tribes. More the Germanic tribes, because the Parthians knew that was going on, but they were like the number one, so you wouldn't want to bother. Although, yeah, I'm not going to go into the whole why did Rome not conquer Parthia, because people have a lot of opinions on that, and I'm not educated enough in it to really talk about it. But going back to Pol Pot, so didn't he? Because obviously, I remember when I brought him up briefly in my Ranavalona video. How much of the actual population of Cambodia did he like properly take out? Like, I know Ranavalona allegedly took out around, I believe it's like 70% of her population.
Well, I've seen the figure go up to 3 million before, but the lowest I've seen is 1.5 million. But that's still pretty significant with regards to the overall population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, considering.
I mean it's you can actually see it. I don't know if we can get it up in editing, but you can actually look up the population of Cambodia between Pol Pot's rule from the late 1970s, where you can actually see the population just dip where the Cambodian genocide is taking place.
Because he's taken so many people out.
Because he's just killed so many people.
So when we had so many interventions, obviously the Americans and us went into Korea, and I don't know if I know the Australians were involved in Vietnam. I don't know how much we were. But why do you think we never really, to my knowledge, had a big war with Cambodia?
Well, funny enough, you mentioned that, because that ties into how he was removed.
Okay.
The killings started taking place near the Vietnam border, and this started to piss off the Vietnamese, who, ironically enough, were also communist. So you ended up having the unified Vietnam. This is after the Vietnam War, deciding to invade Cambodia and take him out. They removed him from power, which is really telling when you are a communist, but you're so bad that another communist country has to come in and get rid of you.
Turning around, like, what are you?
And ironically, and this is something that I could not believe when I found it out. When this happened, the United States, and to an extent the United Kingdom, backed Pol Pot. I'm guessing if I had to put it down to something, I'd guess probably because the Vietnam War was still fresh in their minds, foreign policy wise.
Yeah, fair.
They were on the Khmer Rouge's side.
That's that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I can't believe that.
I can't believe it
shocking.
either.
Considering, like, the Cold War, I always remind, because the one I know more of would be, like, going back to 30 Years' War, and the Cold War always reminds me of the 30 Years' War in a way, because it's meant to be an ideological battle between capitalism and communism, and I'm not going into the politics before everyone starts getting salty in the comments. I'm just saying that's what it was. That is the fact. That it was capitalism versus communism, and how both of those systems are deeply flawed.
Plus Yugoslavia with their market socialism.
Yeah. But if you look at the 30 Years' War, which is meant to be, and I'm really going to have to avoid being spicy here because this will get comments going, the 30 Years' War is basically meant to be Protestantism versus Catholicism. However, the French, which were at the time, I believe, a major Catholic force, ended up bankrolling the Swedish, who were Protestant. And then when the Swedish king died, the name eludes me, he does have a Sabaton song about him. He has several Sabaton songs about him, I believe. It will come to me after. In editing, you'll just see maybe a little name come down. But when he died, they then bankrolled the French. And that is the reality of the 30 Years' War, is it's the French versus the Habsburgs, which were, everyone says are Spanish, but originally they came from the Holy Roman Empire, I believe. So it's like this interlinking web of what's meant to be Protestantism versus Catholicism, but in actuality it's just everyone versus the Habsburgs, and then the people who genuinely believed in the ideology. And I now you've said that, I see the Cold War as a sort of similar. It's meant to be an ideological thing, but it's really just Russia and America trying to become the dominant superpower.
Essentially outdo each other.
Yeah, it was mainly the Soviet Union and America trying to become the dominant superpower, while their allies all were like, yes, we believe in this cause. We're going to take out communism. We're going to take out capitalism.
I mean, another thing. I say that the Vietnamese took him out. They didn't necessarily kill him. They removed the Khmer Rouge from power, and they installed another Marxist-Leninist government. And the Khmer Rouge just retreated to the jungles near the Thai border, the border with Thailand, where they just carried on fighting. And in the later years of his life, Pol Pot started to get ill, rightfully so. And he stepped back from his roles in government, and they replaced him with someone else. And whoever the other government leader who took over the Khmer Rouge was, he placed Pol Pot under house arrest, and he died shortly after. Good riddance. Supposedly, Cambodia today still hasn't fully recovered from it. It was technically referred to as Democratic Kampuchea under Pol Pot. Typical commies, they have to rename everything.
Literally give it a
breath. They always have to put democratic in there, otherwise.
I was literally about to say, every single communist country has democratic somewhere in it.
It's either democratic or people's.
Yeah. Well, actually, to be fair to Soviet, isn't it the United Socialist Soviet Republics?
No. It's the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Yeah, I got it wrong way around. That's it. But yeah, so I think that's it. So it either has democratic people or republic in it. That is the three signs it's a communist country. It's got one of those three in it.
And well, Democratic Kampuchea. That's pretty much what it was. And like I say, it was. This is why I've always said that it is one of the most barbaric and utterly ruthless regimes that has ever existed in all of human time.
I would give Rana Valona the first a run in that. I would. She did do some horrific stuff. She had a particular trial for traitors where I forget its name. This is when I say to people, when I say a name or a date 15 times in a video, it's because I'm going to forget it. So in the script, I write it 15 times. But there was a particular trial where, so you would ingest this particular poison, right? And then you had to eat 3 chicken skins. Now, obviously, you don't really want poison in you, so you have to vomit up the chicken skins, yeah, But if you don't vomit up all three, you are a traitor and you'd be executed.
Blimey.
Like, obviously with Ranavalona, I will say that Western sources didn't like her too much because she was so anti-Christian. So some of the stuff may be exaggerated, but 100%, yeah. But it was under the guise of goodness, where she was like, I'm kicking out the European powers. Like, she beat the French back fairly well and fairly effectively.
It's always good when that happens.
But yeah, exactly. You don't want to. I can't wait for the comments on this one.
I'm Italian, Frenchies. What do you expect?
See, I've already got the comment boards in my head now. Just load of Italian and French flags being commented on. But not like, yeah. I always say, I said it in the video. Like, with Ranavalona, it's up to her. I have my opinion on Ranavalona, which is that the evil she probably doesn't, and kicking out. I mean, eventually the French took over Madagascar anyway, so it was all pretty much naught. But going on a massive buffalo hunt doesn't really count as being a good person. But you did say Idi Amin, and we were looking for another dictator to add on. So do you want to talk a bit about Idi Amin and the?
So I actually know his full title off by heart now because it's such a meme-worthy title. So, His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC DSO MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general, and Uganda in particular.
It's that last bit, is the Uganda in particular.
Uganda. He also called himself the last king of Scotland. Thank you, TikTok, for correcting me in the comments.
So how did he become the last king of Scotland?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. he was he was one of the more batshit loony dictators that we've seen.
He did have some good drip though. He did have some good
he did. he did. He definitely rocked the dictator chic. Whereas Pol Pot just looked like a typical, just no offense to any Cambodians, but he just looked like a Cambodian peasant. But I think that's all part of the he was only in power for 4 years, whereas Idi Amin, I forgot how long it was. How long was he in power for? 1971 to 1979. So he's not. Yeah. He's longer than Pol Pot, but not by much.
Yeah, Idi Amin. So what are some of the things that Idi Amin is truly famous for doing and causing chaos for?
Well, he was quite well known for supposedly liking a bit of cannibalism. Okay. He often boasted about eating human flesh. And there is a rumor, I don't know how true it is, but apparently he ate his wife.
Right. I wasn't expecting. Yeah. We've literally gone from totalitarian evil to eating your own wife.
And not in that way either, chat. I'm watching you.
Yeah. I'm quite. To be fair, when this premieres, there will be a live chat as well. So I'll be interested. I'll be in the chat judging all of you. Just know, even though this is recorded, we're still going to be in the chat. We're still going to be saying.
I'm going to be in the chat as well. Yeah. I'm going to be in the chat just watching. See who makes the edgy jokes. My guy. Yeah.
There'll be at least. But I mean, yeah, maybe he did just get carried away one night, and then he just.
I don't know. He had a tendency to wear an absurd amount of medals as well. You could bet that he awarded most of them to himself. Like, he didn't earn most of them. He used to be a somewhat pro-Western leader, African leader.
Yes. Well, he didn't like the British. He definitely didn't like British.
Well, he was supposedly. He wasn't like Robert Mugabe from Zimbabwe, where he hated the British. He seemed almost proud of his time in the British Army.
Idi Amin served in the British Army? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he white boxing champion when he was in the British Army, which because the man is built like an absolute tank. He looks like he
Yes.
could pack a punch.
I've
I lost you again. No, you're there.
Yeah. Get out a bit. It's typical. It's typical. I don't know. I'm gonna blame the weather or Discord on someone. It's the typical yeah. But I've seen some of the pictures of him.
Just stop oil protesting your bloody.
Yeah. I have seen some of the pictures. Of Idi Amin. He is huge. Isn't there a film about him where he's played by Forrest Whitaker as well?
I think that's the last King of Scotland.
Yeah, that's where that became public knowledge, because he really says he likes the Scottish. Yeah.
But he used to get support from Israel, and then he started getting support from Gaddafi and the Soviet Union and East Germany. But then he started expelling like Asians from Uganda, and he supposedly from the repression and persecution on ethnic as well as political and religious, he supposedly killed between 100 and 500,000 people under his regime.
Okay, so he did have a bit of a tyrannical genocide similar to Pol Pot as well, then. Yeah,
the difference with Idi Amin is you don't really know what his ideology was, because he wasn't like a communist or anything like that. He seemed like his ideology was just me.
Yeah, his ideology was literally
being Lord of all the earth.
Yeah, that is. I do wonder what made him consider Lord of all beasts of the earth. Is that similar? Did you reckon it was like a similar sort of thing like the Queen, where she owned, or I suppose the King now owns all of the swans in Britain? Like,
maybe.
Because that's a. I like to
imagine. Honestly, couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know where that came. I honestly don't know where that came from. But he was also during halfway through his time in office, he was chairman of a Pan-Africanist group. So he was also a bit. It could also be argued that he was a bit of a Pan-Africanist, wanting for those who don't know what a Pan-Africanist is, it's someone that supports a united African state.
I don't see that. That's very, very similar to. I believe we did discuss a bit about talk about the end of Yugoslavia briefly last time. I feel like that would go the same way as Yugoslavia would.
Yeah, it's really different. I know it's quite popular in a lot of African American circles, but the reality is there's such a divide between various African nations that it just wouldn't work. I mean, a prime example, Idi Amin himself. What led to his downfall was he decided to go to war with Tanzania, and that massively backfired on him.
See, that's the thing. A lot of dictators, they use wars to sort of unite the people. Like who was the dictator of Argentina at the time of the Falklands War? I can't remember his name, but I
forgot his name as well. But he did exactly the same thing.
That was the Las Malvanas stuff. Was all just to unify the people against the common enemy, which is a tactic.
It was a way to distract the public from how shit everything was at home. So what do? You start a war, which has pretty much been what every American presidency up till Donald Trump was.
Yeah, which is it's ironic because I remember again watching a documentary when I was younger about how Argentina was set to become like the America of South America, like that you see people going around in business suits, and obviously towards the later end of the 20th century it sort of went downhill a little bit, which is common with these dictators, is they get into power, and when you ironically, for some reason, when you focus on solely yourself, your country tends to suffer, and so they find a nice war to deliver on, which obviously backfired. I going back to Pol Pot and Vietnam quickly though, because you did remind me in saying how Vietnam invaded Cambodia. One of my favourite things to talk about with Vietnam is people forget China tried to invade Vietnam, and
oh really?
Yeah. They failed horrifically. hang on, let me quickly Google to make sure I'm actually getting it right. But if I remember rightly, it lasted 3 weeks. There we go. It's the first one that comes up. The Sino-Vietnamese War. Yeah, on oh, that's Wikipedia. I don't trust Wikipedia. Why did China invade? This is a rough idea. And the reason cited for the attack was to support China's ally, the Khmer Rouge of Cambodia, in addition to the mistreatment of Vietnam's ethnic Chinese minority. And to my knowledge, China got their asses handed to them by Vietnam. Vietnam is very, very good at kicking out foreign invaders. I will.
Play to them.
Yeah, I will. I will give them that. They are very good. Yeah,
I've just looked this up. Apparently, under Amin, Uganda was a member of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights from 1977 to 1979. And then the UK broke relations with Uganda in 1977, and that's when Amin added CBE to his title for Conqueror of the British Empire.
So he only got salty once we gave him the hard shoulder.
He's basically a salty ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, but it sounds it's like
once we left him, it's like, right, I've conquered them.
Like, yeah. To be fair, I mean, technically, he's not wrong. There was no British in Africa at the time of his rule, so
ironically. I mean, supposedly I've just found this. Idi Amin became the subject of rumours, including a widespread belief that he was a cannibal. Amin reportedly boasted that he kept the decapitated heads of political enemies in his freezer, although he said that human flesh was genuinely too salty for his taste. Well, how does he know unless he's tried it?
Yeah, how does it? Yeah, that's not something that someone who. That's not how you deny cannibalism. You don't deny cannibalism. I'd never be a cannibal. Humans are so salty. Like,
well, I suppose he's right with the way some. I suppose he's right when it comes to the way some people act. They do generally act a little bit salty about certain things. But hey,
yeah, especially just go on any TikTok comment section. Any
exactly.
Literally, it's on TikTok now. It's not even a political or like someone's mad at your opinions. It's literally if the video you did, they're like mildly disgruntled with it. Like a lot of my Alexander videos now just have gone from talking about the history of Alexander the Great to just me fancying Alexander the Great, and I get some really interesting hate comments for those ones. And guess what? As the Count knows, being a wind-up merchant means that they give me power. They don't annoy me.
Not in my case, you don't.
Yeah, I was scheduled to be executed in the Discord server for a long time.
As you see, my Jedi powers are far beyond yours. Now, back down.
So, staying around in... Go on.
I wanted to add this as well. During Amin's time in power, popular media outside of Uganda often portrayed him as essentially comic and eccentric figure, which is quite easily believable when you saw the way he used to dress. With the over-exaggerated medals, where it looked like there were so many of them that they were weighing down his suit.
I think it lends to it, because that's whenever I've heard of Idi Amin, I've not seen him as a sort of an evil dictator, as I would say Pol Pot or Stalin or Hitler. I've always seen him as like this comedic sort of funny dictator who just sort of did things and vibed. So like I think that's where that image comes. And a lot of people who don't know the history always like Idi Amin's just the joke dictator, and I think that comes from the title he gave himself as well. He's like. He just sort of sat around and didn't really do anything.
I mean, for the Ugandans and for the Tanzanians, he definitely wasn't a joke.
Yes, but for them he was.
He also apparently had a bunch of nicknames. Like, fair enough, this one in particular is from Wikipedia, but still.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of nicknames listed here. Big Daddy, which is an affectionate nickname. Butcher of Uganda, Butcher of Africa, Butcher of Kampala, Black Hitler. Don't know about that. I think that title goes to Robert Mugabe, as he said so himself.
Yeah.
Dada, which is disputed whether this is part of Amin's family name or a nickname. Some observers have claimed that it was originated as a nickname for Amin's cowardly behaviour. It could be translated as sister, though this has been strongly disputed by others. Okay. And he was also known as Dr. Jaffa, which he earned in his time in exile in Saudi Arabia because of his daily consumption of oranges. Okay. Yeah,
that last one was interesting. All of the horrific stuff he did, and they're like, you know what we're going to give him a name for? His daily consumption of oranges.
He started to get increasingly unpopular within his military cabinet. So there was a bit of a split between him and someone else that was leading the military. And he tried to annex a region of Tanzania. And, well, Tanzania decided to just fight back, and
as you would.
They occupied Kampala and ousted Idi Amin, and he fled to Saudi Arabia in exile. Well, first he went to Libya, then he went to Iraq, and he lived in Saudi Arabia till his death in 2003. But apparently, in interviews, he used to say that he was never sorry for anything that he did. He was convinced that Uganda needed him, and it still does need him.
There is a running theme of like these horrific leaders in history. Like Rana Valona I died peacefully in her bed. Pol Pot pretty much got away with it and just died of old age. So did Idi Amin. Obviously there's countless European monarchs who got away with like some of the horrific stuff. It does annoy you a bit. You're like looking back at history and like literally hardly any of these people saw justice.
Well, to be fair, Pol Pot did get imprisoned.
True.
He was in prison towards the end of his life, but at the same time, there is a part of me that does. I've always said this, that there should have, when the Soviet Union came down and the Berlin Wall fell, there should have been Nuremberg trials for the communist leaders, at least in Eastern Europe.
Oh, 100%. Some of the stuff that went on. Like the invasion of Czechoslovakia, when they tried to go slightly more democratic and like slightly more liberal and less oppressive with their policies.
Yes.
That I believe that Albania and Romania were the only ones who didn't get involved with that invasion.
I'm not sure about Albania. I'm pretty sure Albania wasn't part of it, but they did have a slightly Maoist phase.
They were, to my knowledge, they were part of the East. I could be wrong. Let me know. Let me know politely in the comments below if I'm wrong. It's never going to happen. There's no polite. I believe they were part of the Eastern Bloc.
Albania wasn't part of the Soviet Union.
No, not part of the Soviet Union. Part of the Eastern Bloc, the alliance. The alliance that they made when the Soviets. So it's one of my favourite stories. So we all know the story of how Putin tried to join NATO. But originally, so NATO wasn't set up as an anti-Soviet alliance. It couldn't openly be. Everyone knew that was what it was for, but it couldn't openly be that. So the Soviets, again, this is going to be a rare time when I give credit to the Soviets. They did a fairly based manoeuvre and just went, can we join NATO? Because if it's not anti-us, surely we can. We want to be part of this defensive organisation. What if we get attacked? And,
basically trolling.
Yeah, and obviously NATO went, no. And so then
we're currently not accepting new members at this time. Please try again later.
Pretty much. that was pretty much what they tried to pull. And so obviously the Soviets then formed the Eastern Bloc with Poland, East Germany. I believe Romania was in it, and I'm fairly certain was in it.
Albania was on friendly terms with China. They weren't aligned with the Soviets.
I might have been one. I swear that Albania. I'm determined that Albania was part of the Eastern Bloc. Most of this video is just going to be us googling different things. Eastern.
Hey, listen. Sometimes you've got to refresh your memory.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with see if it's ancient history. I'm much better on it. Eastern Bloc, also known. Oh, the Albanian Soviet split. Okay, so they were aligned, but then they split off in 1956. This is Wikipedia, I will admit, but it's the first result that came up. So around 1956 to 1961, as a result of Nikita Khrushchev's reapproachment with Yugoslavia, along with his secret speech and subsequent de-Stalinization. So the Albanians were upset that they weren't Stalin enough, is what I'm getting out of that. Which is an interesting one. But staying around Africa, as we did mention roughly, which I think is possibly your most popular dictator video so far, Colonel Gaddafi.
Yes, the man of style, and I feel like
had that dictator drip.
Before I even get onto this subject, because I had a lot of somewhat salty people complaining about the way I reacted to the way Gaddafi was dressed. People are trying to say that I was mocking him for it because he was dressed in various African attires. Firstly, in today's world, that would be classed as cultural appropriation, but I don't believe in cultural appropriation. And second, it was more of an acknowledgement that at least Gaddafi had the balls to dress in a unique way that spoke about his beliefs, whereas most dictators, they either dress like peasants, like Pol Pot, or they go over the top with medals and military wear, like Idi Amin, or they wear fantastic capes like people like Pinochet. But Gaddafi, or they just dress like any Western businessman or someone in a board meeting. But Gaddafi at least had the belief that he's going to dress like a Pan-Africanist, which ultimately is what he was.
There we go. The CIA tried to cut. The CIA got upset that he was saying anything positive about Gaddafi.
That's the thing. I've got almost nothing but positivity to say about Gaddafi.
he was a dictator, and he did he like do a lot of killings like other dictators?
No, he didn't. That's the thing. I tried so hard to find like a specific death toll for Gaddafi, and I can't remember how many people I said it was, but I must have I usually spend about 2 hours, an hour to 2 hours doing dictator videos, but the Gaddafi one took me all day because I spent so long trying to find like a specific death toll for Gaddafi, and I honestly can't remember the figure that I said, but you have to be like 3,000 or something. It was really small. Hang on.
Yeah, it's still obviously bad, but compared to everyone else we've discussed so far.
Yeah. I mean, you've got on here that what's it? Estimates of deaths in the Libyan civil war vary from 2,500 to 25,000, but that was it. That was in October. That was in 2011 when he was being overthrown.
Mm.
So yeah, it's really difficult to find a solid thing on Gaddafi. I know and that's another thing that a lot of people, mostly Libyans, that were cheesed off of leader, they kept saying, look, could you remove him if you wanted to through the ballot box? No. Well, he's a dictator by definition. Sorry to disappoint you, Libyans, but it's true. But at the same time, he did a lot of good for Libya. And ironically, and I wanted to bring this up, I got fact-checked for that video, the stuff that I said about Gaddafi.
What, the little fact-check box came up?
No. Who was it? Alba Wabba. I've probably butchered that, but they did a page called Myth or Truth: How Rich Was Muammar Gaddafi's Libya, and overwhelmingly they pretty much agreed with everything that I said.
Oh well, so they fact checked you and you got it right.
Yeah, they basically backed up more or less everything that I said, but there were a few areas where they said that this was a little bit off, but it was mostly accurate. Like he may have left out this bit, that bit, etc.
Yeah.
But you know, we could actually go through this a little bit, just for those who haven't watched the video, because it does dive into it basically. But the thing that really got me about Gaddafi's Libya was that by the end of his reign, Libya was ranked first on the Human Development Index of the whole of Africa, which is surprisingly high for Africa.
The fact that he in a way was really turning that, like, because I know he had stuff like where if you were newlywed, didn't you get something like the equivalent of £12,000 or something?
You got something for a house, yeah. I think it was $50,000.
Yeah, which is is pretty good overall. And I know that I'm not saying any conspiracy theories here, but I will say that just before the invasion of Libya, we do know he was trying to create a new currency. Yeah, I believe it was a sort of Pan-African currency that was based off of gold, wasn't it?
He wanted to I think he wanted to trade oil in euros originally, but he did start to set up a gold-backed currency, yes. And it's not a conspiracy theory because it's been confirmed in the WikiLeaks docs. That's literally what it was.
Oh, right, so that was entirely what upset.
We've seen the emails from a certain Secretary of State that shall not be named of the United States. I don't have suicidal thoughts.
We're getting very close to YouTube nuking the video territory there. I always say this to it, like every other guest I've had on, I'm like, I don't get political at all. But if I ever invite a count on, I just have to sort of sit back and accept that there's gonna be absolute chaos.
Imagine my shock that, oh my god, he's been struck on TikTok for quote unquote violating their community guidelines. Maybe I have a tendency to speak about things that would rather not be spoken about. But that video that I did about Gaddafi, I didn't include some things that I should have included in, and that was sort of his consolidation of power, and he was supposedly involved in a Lockerbie bombing, but you don't know 100% if that was Gaddafi or if it was someone else. But he also supposedly gave he supposedly funded the IRA as well. I don't know if you heard of that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of the Lockerbie. No, I had heard the Lockerbie stuff. I hadn't heard the IRA stuff. It's one of those things where if it's not 100% confirmed, like if you went into a courtroom and you said, "Oh well, he maybe murdered the person," that you're very unlikely to get a conviction unless it's a free speech. But I can make the free speech joke. It's the one political thing I'm open about is my advocation for freedom of speech. I can make that joke. If you can't really confirm it, am I gonna say your neighbour Gaddafi? I don't know. I will say that Libya is worse off without him. Like, and that's
much worse off. It's descended into total chaos, and well, it has modern day slavery now.
Yeah,
which is something that it didn't have before. But there was without a doubt various incidents where people were probably persecuted for criticizing him and that kind of thing, like the typical life you'd expect in a dictatorship if you didn't toe the line. But
yeah.
Overwhelmingly, it seems, especially from the comments that I got, most people in Libya would have much rather kept Gaddafi.
Yeah, I without, in my typical way of going down the middle and not being political as possible, I do think that going in for Gaddafi, there was, as we know from WikiLeaks documents, there were ulterior motives from certain world powers that I will not name. That
he also did, because he was ultimately a socialist dictator, like an Arab socialist dictator. But he was one of the few what I would call good socialist dictators, because one of the things that he did was he nationalized the oil industry, and he used to actually distribute the wealth and the profit from the oil being sold to the people of the country. So actual distribution of wealth.
Yeah, and the socialist dictator actually distributing the wealth. He's got to be the only one in history.
Surprise Pikachu face.
Yeah, genuinely surprised Pikachu face. I mean, if you look at other dictators, I mean, especially Stalin. Stalin wasn't exactly, amazing at distributing his wealth.
No. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to do was talk about how he consolidated power, because supposedly he was going to resign and stand down from power, and he was going to, at a speech in Zawawa, Zuara in the 1970s, in 1973. But instead, he sort of did like a Uno reverse, where he instead proclaimed the start of what was known as a popular revolution. And he initiated it with this 5-point plan. And one of the parts was to dissolve all existing laws to be replaced by revolutionary enactments. The second point proclaimed that all the opponents of the revolution had to be removed, while the third initiated an administrative revolution that Gaddafi proclaimed would remove all traces of bureaucracy and the bourgeoisie. The fourth point announced that the population must form people's committees and armed to defend the revolution, while the fifth proclaimed the beginning of a cultural revolution to expunge Libya of poisonous foreign influences. He began to lecture on this new phase of the revolution in Libya, Egypt, and France. It had similarities with the Cultural Revolution in China, and it was so similar that Mao obviously had the Red Book, and Gaddafi had the little Green Book.
So what is the little Red Book and little Green? Is that like a list of names of people to take out, or?
I can't quite remember what the Red Book in Mao's China was, but the Green Book was supposedly, what was it? It was just his theory. I think it was the same. I think it was more or less the same with Mao as well. That was basically his theory. His little inspirations and his theories were written down in this book.
So like a diary in a sense, really, just a.
Yeah, don't take my views on that. Don't take me on that last bit as absolute fact, because I'm not 100% sure what was in it, but I'm pretty sure it was like a manifesto kind of thing.
You know, as I always say, especially for the podcast episodes, always double check, like go out. This is an informational guide, but it's also for you to then go out and for everyone watching home to then go out and do their own digging and research. Yeah. At the end of the day,
and it's also important to make sure that you check multiple sources so that you eliminate the possibility that what you're reading is just anti-Gaddafi, pro-Western propaganda.
Yeah,
and I rarely say I hate using that term because obviously I'm Western myself, but it is a real issue.
There is, 100%. There is. And I like getting to bits like this because obviously every now and then I'll make a joke that everyone's like, aha, he's secretly right wing, and then I say stuff like this, like Western sources tend to be skewed to be pro-Western, which obviously sounds very left wing. But ironically, I would then foul it up by saying, but that's with any source. If you read a source from China 20 years ago, it's going to be very pro-East and pro-China. All of those nations around the area are going to be very anti-Japanese, because as I've learned from when I started discussing more Asian history, Japan isn't well liked. Japan, I don't know why. Don't know what could have happened.
No idea. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's a bit like a big chunk of the world isn't big fans of us.
Yeah.
We've gone through our list of dictators actually, even though we added Idi Amin in.
The other thing that Gaddafi did is that could be questioned actually was his wars with Egypt and Chad. So he did have a brief border conflict with Egypt and Chad, and well, this is why I like to just call him the Chad dictator, because he literally tried to invade Chad.
I mean, that does make sense. I know. What was the country where they drove around on jeeps and put machine guns on them? Oh, I can't remember. It was really effective. I know it was around. Was it Tunisia?
That I don't know. Unfortunately,
it's just popped into my head as we were talking about it. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. We've gone through this a lot faster than I thought we would.
Well, wasn't there one other person on your little list? Didn't we have Pinochet as well?
Ah, yes, Pinochet. That's the one we're missing. I knew I was missing out one of them. Yeah, Pol Pot. Yeah, it's because it's
more commonly referred to as Mr. Helicopter.
Yes, he was a very big fan of if he was communist in Chile at the time, he would give you free helicopter rides.
Yeah, my best friend is my best friend emigrated to the UK from Venezuela. His family fled Venezuela from basically what can only be described as socialist tyranny. And at some point I'd love to try and arrange something where you and him could have a chat about it, just about Venezuela.
I feel like that could be interesting. Yeah.
Him and his family are big fans of Pinochet, ironically. I disavow because I'm not a massive fan of human life being exterminated, but
yeah, Pinochet, like yeah.
If Pinochet hadn't had Western backing to overthrow the socialist government of Chile at the time, that made critical of it, but it's the fact that his military junta came to power because they overthrew the democratically elected socialist government at the time.
Yeah.
Although it supposedly wasn't that popular, but it still won an election regardless. And the US helped him to power to overthrow them, essentially, which I disavow.
Yeah, no.
Democracy
should obviously always be followed.
When it comes to killings under Pinochet, it's not as high as communists like to make out. From what I found, I mean, the highest that I've managed to find is 60,000. Still pretty high, don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
they like to exaggerate where it's like 1 million, hundreds of thousands, but 60,000 people, most of them you could bet were probably socialists and communists, and a large chunk of them presumably by helicopter. And he also had the caravan of death.
Yes, so what is you briefly spoke about this before? What is the caravan of death?
It was like a squad of Chilean army officials, but it was like a death squad that patrolled around, and
so sort of secret police in a way.
Yeah, they sort of travelled from prison to prison in a helicopter, and they were inspecting military garrisons and then ordering or carrying out themselves the execution of detainees. So. Yeah, it was literally a helicopter that went from prison to prison executing people, which is pretty ruthless. Yeah, there's a quote here of one of the generals. He explained why he didn't return the bodies of the 14 executed prisoners to their families. I was ashamed to see them. They were torn into pieces, so I wanted to put them together, at least leave them in human form. Yes, their eyes were gouged out with knives, their jaws broken, their legs broken. At the ends, they gave them the coup de grace. I can never pronounce that. They were merciless. The prisoners were killed so that they would die slowly. In other words, sometimes they were shot. They were shot them by parts. First the legs, then sexual organs, and then the heart. And in that order, the machine guns were fired. So it's pretty sickening.
Yeah.
But in terms of how he, excluding the deaths, yeah, there was
excluding the evil bits, he was all right.
No. Yeah, I've just found another one as well. The court of murdered individuals at approximately 3,000 during the 17-year Pinochet regime. So. That was the caravan of death alone. So 3,000 people prisoners basically just brutally executed, which is pretty sickening.
Yeah. But the scary part of it is it excluding Pol Pot, how recent a lot of the dictators we've discussed have been, and it is also scary. How like obviously Western intervention places some of these dictators into power, which is
the bit that's the most disturbing for me is the part about eyes being gouged out with knives, because I'm very, I guess the word is squeamish with anything to do with my eyes.
I'm the exact same. As you can tell, I refuse contact lenses.
Just getting me to take hay fever eye drops is an absolute nightmare.
No, Although
I physically cannot watch someone putting contact lenses in because I will just go into a full blown seizure almost.
One of my friends has contact lenses, and they mess around with them just to freak me out. I'm like, no, don't want it. I don't want it.
But yeah, the part I wanted to address, the part I wanted to say about Pinochet that he wasn't batshit crazy on compared to some of the other dictators that we've seen is a little bit like Gaddafi. He was somewhat sensible economically. He had a somewhat sensible economic plan, which was essentially free market economics. So there wasn't necessarily like overwhelming state control over businesses. It was just basically free market.
I mean, that's always I do like that that at least some of them like Gaddafi and Pinochet are at least somewhat competent at ruling a country. So I suppose that limits the number of deaths.
Yeah. Obviously, I still disavow the deaths that fucking happened.
Yeah.
Socialist or not. Especially with the shooting various body parts before you finally put them out their misery. That's just.
It's almost.
There's executing your political opponents, and then there's having so much utter contempt for them that you just want them to die as slowly and painfully as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's moments in medieval history where people aren't even that evil. I suppose the closest you could get is hung, drawn, and quartered, which I believe they did to Guy Fawkes, is the famous story. Because quartering is if I'm remembering it rightly, is the horrific practice of removing each organ one by one. I may be wrong about that. I remember it as a child. But humans, although I will say, to alleviate with some good news to the good people watching this, that to the best of my knowledge, the Iron Maiden is actually just a made-up like American horror trope. The Iron Maiden, where you'd be put in the full of needles, is fake, to my knowledge.
I'm not entirely familiar with it.
You haven't heard the Iron Maiden before?
No, I've briefly heard of it, but I'm not massively familiar with it.
The idea of the Iron Maiden is it's literally like, it's basically a big casket full of needles, and then so you'd be leaned back on one set of needles, and then as they close the casket on you, it'd just be shish kebab basically, because it would force you back into the needles behind you, and then the other needles were going between them, and it was it's very gross and gruesome. But
economic wise, he basically his military junta, because that's what it was at the end of the day. He implemented economic liberalization, but it was mostly like following neoliberal economics, like stabilizing the currency, removing tariff protections. Though he privatized a lot of things as well, and he also banned trade unions. Part of the anti-communism stuff, I suppose.
He's basically just the ultra right wing version of Gaddafi.
Basically, yeah, he's essentially the anti-Gaddafi.
Yeah, they basically did the same thing, but instead of being a socialist dictator, he was just ultra right wing. I wouldn't even say nationalist, because it doesn't sound very nationalistic. It just sounds like, although the word free market doesn't sound like something you would associate with a dictator as well. That's odd to me.
You also wouldn't associate free market economics with a dictator as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, now we still do have dictators and stuff, but so overall, who would you say is your to round it off now? Because we've been going for about an hour or so, and obviously we've got like 10 minutes. We did pre-recorded before when we had the first round of internet troubles. So who would you say is your favourite? Not obviously you can include ones we haven't spoken about today, but who would you say is your favourite dictator? Like, so we'll say your favourite is in the crazy stuff they did, and your favourite as in that came closest to actually being a good leader and a good human being.
I would have to choose Gaddafi or Pinochet, but I'm only choosing Pinochet. I would only say Pinochet because I wanted to touch on his attire. Much like Gaddafi as well, the man also had drip,
Like there's some you have to try and get them up on the screen, but there's some pictures out there where he's wearing just the most amazing cape. It's almost like the one I'm wearing, where he looks just like Count Dooku or Darth Vader. Like it's just a modern cape. It looks absolutely amazing.
This is gonna send me on an absolute wild hunt for these now. This is gonna be an interesting.
Well, you'll be able to find them. You just type in Pinochet cape and they'll come up. Like there's one where he's sort of inspecting a bunch of soldiers. It's almost like Darth Vader inspecting his stormtroopers. Like a modern cape. Have you ever seen one?
I do need to see these pictures. Now, to be fair, I'll try and get them up. I don't normally... You're actually going to make me do proper editing for these. I normally just throw them up and edit it a little bit.
Yeah, with regards to Pinochet, another thing I wanted to address, because a lot of people like to say that he was a fascist. He wasn't. You can't really call him a fascist. At least when you're looking at economics and the way he ran his government.
Yeah.
He was an authoritarian dictator. He was an ultra-nationalist and an ultra-capitalist. But his support of like neoliberal economics and his unwillingness to support national businesses and nationalisation, that distinguishes him from fascism, which anyone will know if they've read Giovanni Gentili's The Origin of Doctrine of Fascism.
Yeah, there's not a lot... There's not many... I don't think there's any way you could fit a free market into a fascist society.
You physically can't. I like to always pronounce that book in the Italian dialect. La Dotolina del Fascismo.
Based. I suppose Italy would know a thing or two about the rise of fascism. little jab there.
We'll have to. We could definitely do that in another episode or something where we could talk, where we could sort of dissect what was actually in that book, because
that'd be I
feel like the word fascist is just thrown around so loosely that I don't think people really understand how batshit lunacy fascism was.
Yeah, especially in its like the purest forms of fascism are hilariously almost comic book levels of I suppose that they're inspired by that.
It's almost comic book villain kind of stuff.
Yeah, like the amount of stuff that I can't remember. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like you say. Now I'm thinking about it. I was like, well, we could talk about it quickly, and then I was like, no, actually, you need to really dive into the rise of fascism.
It's a complex topic.
Yeah, that would be a good solid. Well, maybe, which does lead me on to as we move into the end. It does lead me on to everyone needs to start subscribing to your YouTube, because as we said at the beginning, TikTok is getting spicy. So if you're watching this and you've made it this far, congratulations, because this one was probably even more disorganized. Actually, we managed to stay on the topic of dictators this time. Last time we ended up on dragons.
Yeah, we ended up on bloody dragons.
But I will say, definitely go and subscribe to your account on YouTube, because TikTok is doing what TikTok does best and doesn't like. Obviously, I'm more history, account focuses more on politics and stuff, and that on TikTok is
the occasional space facts. Don't forget about them.
Yeah, and space facts as well.
Because I actually, contrary to popular belief, I actually hate talking about politics. Much like Bashar al-Assad, I would rather just talk about nerd stuff.
Yeah, you'd rather nerd out than run the country.
Yes, literally. I'd rather just do nerdy things rather than ranting about what's going on in the world.
I think that's your most common comment on any of your videos is, are you going to run? In all of your live streams as well, it's like you should run for Prime Minister and stuff like that. Do you think maybe you ever would in 2025 election? That's 3 years away. If I
had the backing, I'd give it a shot. But
I feel like if you get a big enough following, you could do it.
The trouble is, I don't have the finances for it. Yes, and I should also bear in mind, and this is not a dig, this is true. I'm autistic. I can't handle these kind of things. Like, do you know how long it took me to basically get the balls to do live streams? Like, I still get anxious whenever I talk to someone on TikTok, whenever I open my live streams up to people to join and have a chat, I still get really anxious about that.
That's fair and understanding.
I would rather be like a bit like how you have like these little advocacy groups or pressure movements in political parties where they sort of pressurize politicians for specific policies, that kind of thing. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I'd rather do. I'd rather be like an advocate for policies as opposed to being the person that actually sits there and has to implement it. I know that sounds like I want the easier life. Well, it's true.
I feel like an advocacy group, if I can pronounce the word right, advocacy group, it's not exactly an easy thing because you've still got to, one, try and get in with the politician, two, get them to listen to you, and then three, not go too far.
Yes.
That's the fine balance. I mean,
that's one thing that I give credit to. That's one thing I give credit to Jeremy Corbyn and Momentum, because that was an advocacy group. Yeah. Something like that, but on the lines of classical English liberalism.
Yes, which is actually, yeah, no, we'll finish off on that. We'll go on again because you've got a load of new people coming in, and I
more commonly referred classical English liberalism, or as I like to call it, INGLIB.
Yeah. Do you want to go briefly on the stars of INGLIB, because that's a common question?
Yes,
as well.
I could briefly address the 7 stars. Sadly, I've ordered a new flag because I'm in the final stages of the merch store, which is going to be out soon. But the INGLIB flag, which hopefully we could get up on the screen, there's 7 stars at the bottom, and each one stands for a specific principle. And INGLIB is essentially freedom of speech, democracy, individual rights, blind justice, economic freedom, self-reliance, and secularism.
Which are all very based. I don't think anyone can disagree. They're all quite based. But yeah, no, thank you. So with that, thank you for coming on. Thank you for dealing with my tangents and enjoy going on your own as well. That is what this show's about.
It's always a pleasure. I enjoy these.
And we obviously I've plugged your YouTube. So is there anything else other than the separatist movement from the Republic that you would like to plug?
Well, there isn't. I can definitely say that the droid attack on the Wookiees is harmful misinformation. Don't listen to it. And make sure that you subscribe to History Daddy's YouTube channel and follow him on TikTok if you haven't done so already.
Thank you. I mean, I meant for you to plug yourself, but fine. I won't say no.
I don't necessarily need to plug myself because you've already plugged me. But
yeah, fair play.
We can include my link tree into the description below, where that will have all of my socials. It will have my YouTube, my Instagram, my Getter, although I don't really use it, and there's also like a donations thing for the people that want to shill. But other than that,
I've tried using Getter. I haven't really got on with it. I literally just post my video links on it, really. And
very soon, like I say, very soon, I've been saying this for months now, but I swear to you, it's coming. I know I've been saying it for ages, but the merch store is pretty much nearly finished. I just need to double check a few things and then it's done. And I will be including that in the link tree, so stay tuned for that. In fact, by the time this video goes out, it might already be live.
Should be out. If it is live, by the time I will say that in the on just above the link tree, and it will have in big caps merch store is live. I've really slurred my words today. I swear I haven't been drinking. But yeah,
are you sure?
Thank you for coming on. And thank you to everyone for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much, people.